And we're live.
Hello.
It is Tuesday, December 8th, 2020, the day after Pearl Harbor Day.
Let's stop measuring things in Pearl Harbor days.
Yeah. Kate's got her pipe out. It is, Michael Flynn's case was finally dismissed today.
Oh, yeah.
In a 43-page opinion by Judge Emmett Sullivan that concluded that the basis for the department's moving to dismiss his case was probably pretextual. And it's not at all clear that he would have dismissed it had there not been a pardon. But 43 pages later, c'est la vie, there is a pardon, so fuck it. It's dismissed. But by the way, doesn't mean he's innocent. Sullivan slipped that in the end.
He remains one of my favorite federal judges. I really love that guy.
It's a fun little opinion to read. I did a little tweet storm about it. You can read little nice excerpts of the opinion in the tweet thread. We're not allowed to have fun anymore, but somebody did not tell that to our guest who wore the most outrageous jacket that has ever been worn on In Lieu of Fun, a bow tie to match, and it's almost like he thinks we're allowed to have fun anymore. So, Nicholson Price, welcome to In Lieu of Fun. Kate, why don't you introduce our guest?
Yeah, I'm happy to. So Nicholson Price is my friend. No, well, he is, but that's not the only reason that he's here. Nicholson Price is a professor of law at Michigan Law School, and he teaches and writes in the areas of intellectual property, health law, and regulation. In particular, you do a lot of work that I thought would be super interesting to our guests, given the questions from yesterday on the show with Mark Lemley about biotech and patents. And just kind of like, I haven't caught up with you. I haven't seen your colorful bow ties in a long time. You are a lover of scotch. I can't believe it's taken us this long to have you on the show, but thank you for coming. Cheers.
Thank you so much for having me. It's truly a delight to be here. Cheers. To answer just a few of the questions that I've seen popping up on the side, it is not a neck beard, it's just a goatee. This is a real bow tie that I did tie myself. It is a schematic of the experiment that discovered the Higgs boson. Yeah, that's all the questions I saw.
Wait a minute, but I got one more to add. Is the hair a COVID do, or is it always like that? Because
what would you? Your hair's always like that-ish. It's not quite as long.
I get about 2 to 3 haircuts a year. This year, I've only gotten 1.
I see. All right.
I also haven't. I went back. Oh yeah, and you're drinking Cragganmore.
Wow,
Cragganmore Distillery.
You're very good with the following along in the chat while also engaging us. I think this is like mostly people get distracted by it, and I feel like try to keep like having a conversation while also reading what people are saying about them at the same time. It's a little distracting.
I can ignore the chat. I can totally ignore the chat.
Yeah.
And just focus on the food.
Oh, you don't have to. We have a lovely chat.
Yeah,
it's like lovely people.
Group of people. So I want to start with a question about your rather unusual professional background for a law professor, which is that you are actually a closet biologist.
Closet.
Yeah.
In the closet about it.
It's true. So I did them bizarrely enough as a joint degree. So there are a decent number of people in the academy who do kind of IP or sciencey law who have PhDs. And I think almost without exception, they did a PhD and then decided no, law is what they wanted to do, and then one got a law degree. There might be others, but there are certainly not many people who did joint JD PhDs in the hard sciences. So I did it as a joint degree in law and biology. I knew that this is what I wanted to do from kind of the get-go, be thinking about how science influences law and how law shapes science. And so I did them both at the same time, which was weird and kind of fun.
super interesting. So, do you do any biology research, or at this point, or is that just a background expertise for purposes of your legal scholarship?
That's just background. That's just for legal scholarship now. So I was in a protein crystallography lab, and it turns out protein crystallography is not really a side hobby. Plus,
I don't. You said, I mean, I don't like it. I don't like admitting this super often. I have no idea what that is. like protein crystallography, like I can't even, I know all of those words, but none of that, I don't know how they fit together.
So you know those fun pictures of molecules that you see that have like spiraled ribbons, and like little lines and things like that, and you're like, oh, that's what the molecule looks like? Protein crystallography is one of two big ways that we get those pictures. Basically, you purify the protein and make a crystal out of it, and you shine X-rays through it and see how they scatter. And essentially, the analogy I would draw is it's as if you had a rock that you couldn't see, and you have a pond. And the way to figure out the shape of the rock is to throw the rock into the pond over and over and over again and look at the ripples around the edge and try to figure out from that what shape the rock was.
Oh, that is like a fascinating analogy. I can't ever imagine figuring out the shape of a rock that way myself, but I imagine that if I have the right tools to measure said ripples, I could probably do it. So that makes a little bit more sense. How does one capture like on film, like that actually happening?
So you know those really big circular synchrotron things, like whenever you see like a huge giant scientific laboratory where it's like they're running things around and around in a circle really fast.
Yeah.
So at a number of points along those, they will have places where they direct some of the beam so that they get a super, super, super strong X-ray beam. You shine it through the crystal, and it basically makes a diffraction pattern of spots on a detector. And then from that diffraction, you do some sweet math and get back what it must have looked like to give you that sort of pattern. It's really cool.
Yeah, that is actually kind of cool. I'm glad I asked. Go ahead,
Let's
Ben.
talk bow ties.
Yeah.
Why?
I've always,
I went.
This is a conversation that I've had with Paul Rosenzweig over the years, and one thing I've always noticed about people who wear bow ties is that they're kind of evangelical about it. It's an identity thing. So walk me through it. How did you come to be a bow tie person?
You totally are a bow tie person.
And like, why?
People had been telling me that I was a bow tie person for a while. I disagreed with them, and then it turns out they were all right. I finally learned to tie one exactly halfway through my clerkship, and I went totally cold turkey and have not worn a regular necktie since January 1, 2012. I have enough bow ties that I don't repeat a bow tie over the course of a term for any particular class. So I make sure that I have a stack of or a rack of bow ties I have not yet worn and bow ties I have already worn this term.
All right, important bow tie questions. On a scale of 1 to 10, how much does it bother you that you have this in common with Tucker Carlson?
It's not just Tucker Carlson, no. It's like a whole like conservative thing, unfortunately. And I think that the fact that you do it despite being not particularly conservative, as far as I know, is great because he reclaims it. Sorry, I answered the question for you.
Oh no, I appreciate that. That is an excellent and true answer. I think there are other bow tie wearers that I empathize more with. With more than Tucker Carlson. Let us just say.
That's extremely diplomatically put.
What was the name of the teacher? Did you ever read the Magic School Bus books, Ben, to your kids or anything? What
no,
Mrs.
I don't think so.
Okay, Mrs. Fraggle or Mrs. something, Frizzle, Mrs. Frizzle. I kind of feel like your bow tie and you know how her dress always changed around like whatever was happening in the plot of the movie, like the solar system. She'd have a solar system dress, and then it would be like. Anyways, I kind of feel like your jacket bow tie thing is kind of like a version of that. You're like the Mrs. Frizzle of like Michigan Law School. So.
My dean told me at one point in time, they say that people get more themselves as they get older. And his response was, I'm worried about you, Nicholson. And it turns out I've already become pretty much myself, I think. But I'm working on it still.
I sympathize with that because, like, I used to have one dog shirt, and now I have like 8 or 9 of them. And like the older I get, the more higher percentage of my life I spend in dog shirts. And this is gonna, only gonna get worse the longer that COVID goes on.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, this jacket was, so I did midterm evaluations for my students, and one of my students said, in these dark times, we need your most colorful outfits. And so, well, then I acquired this jacket, which I had not previously had, and I am now delighted that I own this jacket.
Yeah, I'm delighted that you own this jacket. Yeah, I agree.
So this is in lieu of fun, so you're wearing that jacket. If you were on network television, would you wear that jacket? Because I feel like that may be the difference between you and me. That like I would wear a dog shirt on in lieu of fun, but when when I go on MSNBC, I wear just a normal jacket and shirt, and I look pretty pedestrian. But I feel like you might be the sort of person who would wear the same outfit on network television as you would on in lieu of fun. Which is, by the way, a high compliment.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I have never had the option. I have gone. I think the fanciest thing that I have yet been invited to. I didn't yet own this jacket, but I did wear a purple corduroy jacket, a bow tie, and purple shoes, and non-fancy pants. That was at a National Academy of Medicine keynote address, and I feel like that counts as like fancy enough that that's probably as fancy as I'm going to get, unless somebody requires me to be fancier.
No, when there's an IP issue associated with one of these vaccines, you will start getting media calls.
Yeah.
Maybe.
So speaking of that, as you mentioned, the vaccine. So yesterday we had Mark Lemley on, and it was a great conversation. We talked about video games a whole bunch, and then at the end, kind of we delved into IP issues around the vaccines. I think that there had been like a New York Times article yesterday that kind of did you see that? So let's start there. What did you think of the New York Times op-ed that basically said, listen, if you want a vaccine, get rid of IP? Did you agree with that take? Did you have a more nuanced understanding? I feel like Mark didn't answer this question, so I'm hoping that we can get a solid answer out of you.
Yeah, so I have 3 different answers, all of which I believe to be true. Here's the first answer. And this is one that I'm largely cribbing from Lisa Willett, Mark's colleague at Stanford, and Daniel Hemmerle, who's a professor at University of Chicago Law School. And that is, this is not going to be the last pandemic we have. And so in terms of incentives, it's been a great thing that a bunch of drug companies have basically gone all out, flat out, trying their hardest to get something as fast as possible. And that is awesome. And frankly, what's happened this year has been kind of mind-blowingly great in terms of pharmaceutical innovation. Like the drug companies have been frankly knocking it out of the park right now. If we tell them, by the way, you're not actually going to make any money from this, I think they are going to be much less likely to do that next time. And there's going to be a next time. And so Hemmerle and Willett's point, and I am just totally convinced by it, is like, look, we want them to be ready for next time. We should want them to make a ton of money. If this is a pandemic that's costing us tens of billions of dollars a day, if we get a vaccine that ends the pandemic a week earlier, paying Pfizer $40 billion is
like nothing.
It is a bargain. So that's the first answer. We want big incentives. The second answer is it's totally unclear to me that patents are actually an issue in terms of capacity. And so here's my basic question. Like, if it were the case, so the basic proposal in this op-ed is, hey, we should basically ignore IP for a while or allow countries to do waivers of IP in terms of patents or trade secret law. And so we'll get lots more vaccine. But here's my question. Like, Pfizer likes to make money. They've already said, we want to make money on this vaccine, which again, C point number one, I don't think is a crazy thing to do. I think if it were an easy thing to do, like, I cannot see why Pfizer would not say, hey, you, like, whatever vaccine manufacturer elsewhere in the world, make a ton of the vaccine. We'll take you can take a 10% cut. We'll take 90%, just make a lot of it. We'll make lots of money, especially because there are other vaccines coming down the road. This is a somewhat competitive market. So if it were an easy thing to do licensing and scale up, I cannot understand why Pfizer and Moderna wouldn't already be doing that. Which leads me to think that...
Can I ask a stupid question about this? Yeah. If you simply strip somebody of their IP, that's a takings, right?
That's not a stupid question. It's also a little complicated, but go ahead. You know better than I do.
Yeah. So it's a complicated question. It's probably in some areas. Trade secrets, for instance, they've said, hey, if you take someone's trade secrets, that's a taking, but only prospectively, not retrospectively. Or sorry, only retrospectively, not prospectively. Patents are in the nature of like a government-granted monopoly that has some inherent, not quite a monopoly, government-granted thing like a monopoly that has some inherent conditions on it. For instance, there is a section of the US code that says if the government uses your patent, then your only recourse against the government is a reasonable remedy, not an injunction. You can't keep the government from using your patent. They can just get some money from you, or you can just get some money from them. So like there are limits on this. The short answer is it's a hard question.
Okay, but I'm Pfizer, I develop something, the government says they want to take my intellectual property and put it in the public domain so that, you know, I would normally have 20 years of patent rights, but they're going to make anybody able to produce it. I'm going to recover under those circumstances, right?
I would think so, yes.
All right. So my question is, given that the government's going to pay for it one way or another, so why not just have the government subsidize the distribution and do it really directly? You don't have to make a big IP case out of it. Just say the government should buy a shitload of vaccine and give it to everybody. And that way the company is whole, the product is distributed, the government has lots of negotiating price. But if you get rid of the IP, you're still going to be found to have at some level, that's going to be, you're going to have to compensate the company for the taking of its IP.
So I think there are two answers to that. One answer is, sorry, I know I keep giving you multiple answers. I didn't even tell you about answer 3 to the first question. But in any case, so I think there are two potential answers to this. So one answer is, that's kind of what we're doing right now, right? Which is to say, you know, the only reason to try to do it as a taking, as opposed to doing this, is for some reason if you think that Pfizer can't manage its own manufacturing and distribution efficiently and the government can do it better. That's not normally the way we conceive of government versus private industry operations, but you could make a case for that and say like, oh, the government's
not rather than do years of litigation over that, why don't you just sit down with Pfizer, license the ability to have, 20 other companies produce it? It's going to be cheaper than the cost of the litigation plus the. I mean, when the government steps in to seize the steel mills, bad things happen.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I think it is going to and that's why I don't think these options are being pursued. Frankly, I don't see the patent rights here. I view that as kind of a red herring. I don't think that's what the big answer is. Like, it's not like Pfizer right now is saying, hey, we're not going to produce a bunch of vaccine for you unless you give us money, right?
We
The
have
deal
it,
is
and we will control the supply.
right. It's like, here, have the money, give us the vaccine. And the answer is like, sorry, it's going to take us a while to make all of it. And so, I think that's basically what's going on. Now, I should also be clear. The third answer that I wanted to give initially is the manufacturing bit. It's like not trivial. And that's what I think is that's what the actual roadblock is here. It turns out it's actually hard to pump out a bunch of the vaccines. So part of what that means is if you were to say like, hey, no IP, we're going to transfer all this stuff to other companies, it still might take a while for them to scale. It's still, I think, very likely that it will take a while for them to scale up and do it and make a bunch of stuff. But the other thing, all these proposals to say like, screw patents, screw trade secrecy, it doesn't actually get you the secret sauce, right? If you say trade secrecy doesn't apply, that just means if someone steals the secret sauce, you can't sue them. But that doesn't give you the secret sauce. And
this
so
is kind of like 230
doesn't
fix, getting rid of 230 doesn't fix the internet. It just lets you sue somebody if you're upset with something on the internet.
Right.
That's a different day's conversation, Kate.
I know.
I thought that was every day's conversation.
Only for Kate.
So that's super interesting. So like, that's why you think, so I think that that's a great point. I think people tend to hand wave generally in areas that they don't know that like the technical specifications of, or even the basics of, like patent law, and kind of chalk them up to patent issues. But like what's really at play, as you kind of point out, is really would not be something that would end up like any type of change in like the IP rights would not end up resulting in more vaccine faster for people in more places. It would mostly just end up like creating other weird externalities. Is that kind of what you're saying?
I'm not willing to go quite so far as that. I think it's probably like, are there patents on platform technologies that could be relevant to increasing speed of access to vaccines because some people are worried about this? Maybe. I don't see this as a huge thing, but I'm not sitting in boardroom meetings with, Dr. Reddy's laboratories or whoever, or like anybody about let's try to manufacture this vaccine, but here's this patent that we're really worried about. Now, the patents, like the most recent patents, of course, like those aren't out yet, right? Whatever Pfizer or Moderna have filed for COVID-19 vaccines in particular, those patents are still they're not in force. They don't exist.
Isn't it self-evidently true, based on the public record, that whatever the problem is not IP in this space? Based on the following crude analysis. The virus first presents in December, November, January of last year. It is sequenced almost immediately. Vaccine research begins almost immediately. Within 1 year, within 5-6 months, there are a number of vaccine candidates that are ready for clinical trials. Their clinical trials begin with shocking speed, produce stage 3 data within 6 months. So the entirety of the holdup is a function of, one, testing the compounds, not developing the compounds, and two, manufacturing, which is not an IP problem. So what is even the argument that there's an IP issue of all the things you can blame intellectual property for? And I think there's some pretty substantial ones, particularly in the copyright arena. But what is even the argument that we have an IP problem here?
So I'm not quite willing to go so far as to say there is no IP problem at all. What strikes me as the more relevant IP problem here, like to the extent that, let me take a step back. If we wanted to get the vaccine absolutely as fast as possible to in the largest numbers as quickly as possible, I think it would have been a useful thing to start manufacturing scale up not only at Pfizer and Moderna and AstraZeneca, but also at other contract sites early on. For that to work, that would require substantial transfer of trade secret information and manufacturing know-how about how to make these particular vaccines. It would be very non-trivial. It's still like, I think that would be like the biggest thing that would potentially move this forward. That is kind of an IP issue, and as much as this is secrecy and know-how and stuff like that, it's not about patents, at least not to my view. I keep running up against like the economic issue, which is I feel like there must be something missing because of the fact that, say, the innovator companies are getting a boatload of money to scale up manufacturing at risk and to produce a ton of doses at risk. And so I don't see why they wouldn't scale up and wouldn't license out if it were relatively straightforward to do, because they stand to make a boatload of money doing it. So like that, to me, reasoning backwards says, okay, like it's not trivial to do the scale up across lots of different sites and lots of different companies. I don't know exactly what the best way to do is. Patents, again, don't seem to me to be the big barrier here. The way that patents come up, and the reason that people are saying that patents are important, is because patents are the most visible way to say no one else can in fact make this, and therefore we're going to charge a bunch of money, and the charging the money is the thing. That's where I think the Hamel and Willett point comes in, which is like, we should pay them a bunch of money so that they also do it next time.
Can I ask a question that we've talked about, like what isn't the problem? What has been like the most interesting thing to you, either as a law professor or as a biologist, that has been like happening in this space in the last, like over the last year? I mean, I bet there's like a ton of stuff, but like, I don't know. I'm just kind of curious what you've been really noodling on, or what you think people aren't talking about and they should be.
Man, this year has been just a truly awful year in a lot of ways, but it's been really an embarrassment of riches in terms of the stuff I care about and biosciences innovation and the law and policy aspects of it. It's incredibly cool. Obviously, something that I care about is manufacturing information and transferring this stuff. It's something, it's a drum I've been beating for a while, along with my collaborators, Artie Rai at Duke and Timo Minson at Copenhagen. Basically, like, I think everybody, it is an easy tendency to say, here's a crisis, let me relate this to the thing that I cared about before the crisis. So that's what I'm doing, which is to say, one of the things I care about is manufacturing and secrecy and stagnation in drug manufacturing. And man, I sure do wish everything were more open and transparent and collaborative and innovative in manufacturing. And so my hope was like, hey, we should do that here because it's a giant global pandemic. Like maybe this will be the tipping point that gets us over into doing manufacturing better in the drug industry. Maybe. I haven't given up hope yet. But that's something that I've been thinking about a bunch. The other thing that I cared about before the pandemic, and wouldn't you know, it turns out to show up a lot in the pandemic, is artificial intelligence. And so thinking about how AI is playing a role in the pandemic, how we're seeing things that are developed and then deployed without a whole lot of validation and trying to figure out stuff with all the data and all of that, that's also been really exciting. Both of these have gotten some attention, but that's what I've been noodling around for the last several months.
So you teach a small seminar about with science fiction. Can you and so I actually, we've had Ada Palmer, who I've talked to you about before, has been on the show a few times, and I know you love her. I know she's great. Ben totally was was like, who is this random science fiction author you've invited on? And was like, oh my God, she's
super impressive.
Yeah, like dazzlingly
she's really
brilliant.
Cool.
Yeah, just super cool. So she's been wonderful to kind of have on and talk to. But I'm just really curious, like what like my science fiction brain never read a lot of stuff about pandemics, but I imagine yours did. And so I'm kind of interested if there are like theories or things that you've seen play out. I actually think Ada's world in her books is like really relevant in ways to like everyone being online now to certain types of aspects. But I'm curious what your thoughts are.
Yeah, so this was fun. So the last 4 years, I've taught a mini seminar. Normally it's at our house over dinner with about a dozen students. And it's been about science fiction every time. The first one was just law and science fiction. Then it was AI and law and science fiction. And this year it's pandemics and law and science fiction. And the themes that kind of end up coming up are kind of human hubris. A lot of the science fiction takes on this are us screwing up the world. The question of the breakdown of social order. So we read Saramago's Blindness. The questions of kind of government interventions and how well it works. I stayed away from the zombie films, although I thought about it. I thought about World War Z and 28 Days Later and things like that. And ended up not quite going down that road. Well,
but I haven't watched them in the pandemic.
I realized I really hate zombie films and horror films, so that actually didn't work super well for like, let's talk about these for several hours.
Why do you hate them?
It turns out I like films to entertain me and or make me happy and or excite me, and I don't particularly want to be sad or scared, and so I don't tend to watch dramas or horror or zombie things.
But that kind of leaves you with comedies.
That's not so bad. I mean, I remember my mom coming in when I was like 18 and watching something really, really depressing. I forget what it was. It was like weeping. And she was like, why do you watch things that are so sad? I'm like, this is great art, Mom. It won like it's like a French film. And then I'm like, man, there's too much in life to be sad about. Like old age has made me just want to watch like Cheers repeats over and over again.
I watched last night Alex Gibney's movie about.
Oh, did you?
About Lance Armstrong. And it is so satisfying.
Oh, really?
Just want to say, no zombies.
We had the documentary filmmaker Alex Gibney on. He did the really great documentary about Theranos, the Elizabeth Holmes crazy shit that was on HBO. Anyways, he's done a ton of stuff, tons and tons of stuff. So you like the Lance Armstrong one though?
Where
does it end? The story?
So it is. He filmed Lance's 2009 comeback attempt, where he finished third, and thereby broke open renewed interest in his drug use. And so he filmed that as a feel good. It was almost like he was very much in the Lance Armstrong camp at the time. But then when Lance didn't win, the movie kind of didn't come together. So he had all this footage from 2009, and then when Lance admitted it all, he got back together with him and did a retrospective look and an examination on how he'd held this lie together for so many years. And so the movie is actually just about the maintenance of the lie. And it's an amazing piece of work, and it's beautifully scoped.
Cool.
Anyway.
Yeah, so sorry, but you don't like zombie films, and I kind of get it. I stopped reading. I was like reading the huge. I read a lot. I read like 2 or 3 volumes of Walking Dead, and then like that, I had to stop reading because it just got like it was just like a constant onslaught. It just felt like something new and terrible was constantly happening, and there was no overriding hopefulness narrative at all. It was just more and more and more bad. And again, not exactly like what I'm in the mood to tune in for after 2020. So I was going to kind of just ask what your semester was like teaching generally. We've asked this to a lot of the academics to kind of see how schools are doing, like how they're dealing with stuff differently. And then I guess we can go to audience questions if you're up for some audience questions.
Yeah, totally. So the semester's been interesting. So I've had 3 small classes. I have the Sci-Fi Pandemics and Law mini seminar. I had a seminar on innovation in the life sciences. Obviously also pretty topical. And then I teach patent law. Also decently topical. And so all of my classes have been small, and honestly, the students have been great. It's hard. The thing that I find most different is in a normal class, it feels like you pour out a lot of energy, but you get a lot back from the students, at least if it's not going terribly. I don't find I get the same energy back from a screen. So it's a lot of pouring energy into a screen, but not a lot of energy back. So personally, I find it really much more tiring than normal.
Depleting.
But yeah, but honestly, the students have been terrific. I find that the formats for my classes actually translate quite readily to Zoom. I think Socratic in a small class translates pretty readily. I think small group work translates pretty readily to breakout rooms. The seminar worked well with a small seminar. So it actually worked pretty well. I was really impressed by the students. They were clearly really tired, but they also they brought it, and it was really great.
Yeah. Do you want to?
All right. Esther, you get the first question today.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, Esther.
How are you?
And if I recall, Esther, you are in the biological sciences, right?
Yes. I originally trained in molecular biology, but more recently I used to work in Bruce Albert's lab. You've probably heard of him. But more recently, I work on biological control of insect pests using injection technology. So I know a lot about rearing of flies. Anyway, to my question, it has to do with medical privacy in this current age of sequencing genomes, perhaps a time where we might all be wearing wristbands and information about various health parameters being transmitted online to our doctors. This brings up privacy issues, but what I'm really interested in is a comparison of discussion that might take place in a country like the US that has a private health insurance system. So maybe we're concerned about what our employer knows, what our insurance company knows in terms of coverage, and compare that to countries that have a more socialized healthcare system, New Zealand, Australia, the UK, something like that.
Yeah, so I think a decent amount about medical privacy, and I think you can group concerns into kind of 2 different buckets: consequential and deontological concerns. I should also say that this is cribbing from an article I wrote with Glenn Cohen in January 2019, and so. The deontological concerns is just, I don't want folks to know stuff about me. Like, I feel violated when people know things about me. The consequentialist concerns are the kinds of things like, well, my health insurance company might know things about me and use that to raise my rates. My insurance company might, or my employer might know things about me and use that to fire me, things like that. In a kind of socialized medicine sense, a socialized medicine world, a lot of those consequentialist concerns are decreased because you're not going to be treated differently, or at least you shouldn't be treated differently. We're not worried about health insurance, those sorts of things. And so those concerns kind of go away. It doesn't do much for the deontological concerns. In the US, I think those concerns used to be substantially more important because in particular, your health insurance rates would change a bunch based on your medical history or based on your genetics, and your insurer could know about them and do different things and all of this kind of stuff. That's much decreased with the passage first of the Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act, and then more importantly with the passage of the Affordable Care Act, such that a lot of those concerns have gone away. Not all of them, in particular things like disability insurance and long-term care insurance, life insurance, all of those still are changeable based on your medical history. Interesting side note of that's one thing that I think a lot of people don't necessarily, an interesting potential consequence of the idea that the Supreme Court might strike down the Affordable Care Act, which I don't think is super likely, but is still possible. If that's the case, one thing that goes away is community rating, which means all of those people who shared information or got genetic tests or no longer hid things from their doctors because they weren't worried about getting booted off insurance, well, that could all be a thing again. Yet another thing to be grateful for the last decade's interminable, unremitting, horrific assault on the Affordable Care Act.
With that optimistic note,
Mr. Bots.
David is always good for a smile. Hello.
Hi. I see what you did with the blue crow, man. I like the blue crow.
So I like to leave all of you Easter eggs.
Are those? Is that a picture of physics of what? A protein crystallography or?
No, that's more DNA.
That's just DNA. Okay.
So Nicholas, I love the beard action. So that I want to thank you for that. So you're representing, that's excellent.
The two of you are like I'm very happy right now. This is good.
So with your background in health law and in life sciences, what are your thoughts about the patentability of the human genome? And then in addition, part two is drug companies have been subtly changing the formulation for insulin over the last number of years, very subtly, to prevent it from going off patent. At the same time, they are cranking the price up terribly. What do you have thoughts about how to address this and fix this in some sort of regulatory fashion? Because people, as you know, are literally dying because they cannot afford to pay for their insulin.
Yeah, there's a lot there. So I'll say a couple of things. The first one is the patentability of the human genome is actually pretty settled. It's not patentable. Individual isolated genes aren't patentable. As of 2013, a Supreme Court decision called Myriad versus Association for Molecular Pathology, the Supreme Court said isolated DNA, including genes, is not patentable. So all those gene patents are now gone. The insulin point's a really interesting one. I agree with you that prices are egregious and people dying from inability to get insulin is insane, and our drug pricing system is often insane. However, because I'm a law professor, so I gotta be like, but on the other hand, here's some other stuff. Just tweaking the formula for insulin isn't enough to say insulin stays on patent, because patents last for 20 years, and the thing that was patented isn't patented after the patent expires. So straight up insulin, totally not patentable. And you can in fact get straight up pure regular old insulin, like insulin classic, pretty cheap right now. And it turns out that drug companies have made minor modifications, and the modified versions, those are the ones that are more expensive. So what people want, understandably, is the newer, better insulins. And I think they should have access to them at a reasonable price. And I think if we had, a better healthcare system and a more reasonable drug pricing debate, that's one thing that we would have. But as to the idea that things get tweaked and therefore the old insulin is still patented, it's not. The old insulin's out there. So I don't know. That's a distinction that I don't see enough in this debate. It's like saying, well, no, I don't have to make it. It's like saying Vioxx shouldn't be expensive, but you can still get aspirin. To be fair, you don't want Vioxx. It gives you heart attacks and kills you. Like, that's a bad idea. But second-gen painkillers, those are expensive, but first-gen painkillers are still out there. Similarly, first-gen insulin's still out there. Second-gen insulin's more expensive. They're separate questions.
Yeah.
All right. Before we go to the next question, there is something very important we have to say to Tony Cava.
Happy birthday, Tony Cava!
Happy birthday to you.
To you.
Happy birthday to you.
To you.
Happy birthday.
Happy
dear
birthday.
Tony
Tony
Cava.
Cava.
Tony.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday to you.
Very good.
And many more.
Wow. That is amazing. I'm getting all verklempt over here. I'm not even a tribe member. Wow, thank you very much. I was going to tell you I have my own Easter egg. I'm wearing my my tie cummerbund, but you're just going to have to take my word for it. So my question is a pretty quick question: is should is this whole idea of IP protections trumped by the Defense Production Act? And if not, shouldn't it be? It seems strange to have this Production Act where you can tell somebody to, get on it and produce, or we will, if they can just turn around and say, well, we hold the patent.
They're actually pretty separate issues. So let me say, first off, they're separate issues in as much as they're separate statutory authorities. DPA authorizes the production of certain things, and patents, as you know, create an exclusionary right. Here's the reason it doesn't actually matter, though. There's a section of U.S. law, 21 U.S.C. section 1498, that basically says, so as a background principle, the federal government can't be sued unless it lets people sue. That's just sovereign immunity. It let people sue for a bunch of things. It said in 21 U.S.C. section 1498, hey, if you want to sue us for patent infringement, go ahead. But you cannot get an injunction. You cannot prevent us from practicing the patent. Instead, all you get is a reasonable royalty. You also can't get enhanced damages or attorney's fees or other stuff like that. The only damage you get is a reasonable royalty. And so what this means is the government could say to a company, or the company that holds the patent, or somebody else, make this stuff. Whoever holds the patent, whether it's that company or a different company, could sue the government, and what they would get is a reasonable royalty. So the government can't make it for free. They have to pay something for it, but you can't stop them from doing that. And that's a little bit of a callback to the debate for the question we were having earlier about how important patent rights are here earlier. The question is, what would a reasonable royalty look like? Would it be a bunch of profit? Would it be some? Like, there are patent law doctrines that try to deal with that. Unclear how a court would deal with that in the context of, say, a COVID-19 vaccine. But the short answer is patent law doesn't keep the government from making stuff, because the law that lets the government be sued for violating or for infringing patents doesn't let courts stop the government from doing stuff.
Mickey Hines, the floor is yours.
Okay. Hi. Hi, Kate. Question I have relates to more of the infrastructure of delivering the Pfizer vaccine. It appears that the cold temperatures is going to be provided by CO2, dry ice, and there's an infrastructure around dry ice. And is there something like this federal helium reserve as a precedent for the government to put scale into CO2 to support the vaccine delivery?
What an interesting question. I hadn't thought. I completely forgot about that.
Yeah, so I haven't thought. I don't know. I frankly have no idea whether or not dry ice is a significant bottleneck for this. My guess is no. I don't know this. This is just me thinking off the top of my head. I don't think dry ice production is likely to be a big hurdle in terms of the amounts that we're looking for here. the challenge with this, I mean, that's not to say the challenges with distributing the Pfizer BioNTech vaccine are not huge. The fact that it has to be held at minus 80 Celsius is intense. Most places don't have minus 80 freezers. Those cold packs with dry ice that they're building, that Pfizer is making to ship the drugs, like they only last for a certain period of time. Like it's gonna be hard, and it's gonna be a real equity issue because, you know, places that have minus 80 freezers, academic medical centers, big city hospitals, places that really can't deal with minus 80 freezers or have the infrastructure to, you know, use an entire box of vaccines in a week before it gets too warm or whatever, those are going to be places with lower resources, both in the US and out of the US. So really challenging distribution concerns, which is part of why the Moderna vaccine is exciting, because that only needs to be kept at minus 20, which is just kind of a standard freezer, and the AstraZeneca Oxford vaccine, which can be kept at room temperature for like 6 months. So the distribution challenges are going to be quite challenging.
Are we 20? When you say minus 20, you're talking Fahrenheit or Celsius?
No, minus 20 Celsius, which is just kind of your
similar at that
standard 0 degree.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you've got a minus 20 fridge or freezer in your kitchen right now.
Yep.
You don't have a minus 80 unless you are super weird.
Well, you know.
Laura McClellan, do you have a minus 80 freezer?
Absolutely not.
But you do have a question.
I was just wondering, you've written about black box medicine, and for the audience, at least I think it is basically talking about black box algorithms that are used in medicine. I was wondering if you could talk about that in more of maybe not a totally lay term, but you know, for this audience.
Yeah, so I've written a bunch about the use. So when I think about black box, I'm thinking not about kind of secret algorithms, but in terms of kind of inherently opaque artificial intelligence algorithms, because you really don't know exactly how the algorithm is reaching its recommendation or making its prediction or something like that. Largely, these are AI systems where we take in a bunch of data, kind of feed it to a big fancy computer, and we get out a recommendation or a prediction or something. And they are like shockingly accelerating and like so fast accelerating into medicine and medical practice. And COVID has been kind of a bump in that direction because we have been using it more in times of COVID-19. You know, 5 years ago, this was totally a pipe dream. And now there is machine learning and artificial intelligence across medical practice. And I think there are a ton of really fascinating issues. How do we regulate them? When FDA sees them, how should FDA make sure that they're safe and effective? What about the huge fraction of algorithms that FDA isn't going to see at all? How should we deal with liability? When somebody gets injured and the decision was based on an artificial intelligence algorithm that nobody knows exactly how it works. Is that the physician liable for that? Is the developer liable for that? Are they both liable for that? Is the hospital liable for that because they picked the crappy product? How do we know it's a crappy product? Intellectual property issues are interesting. You can probably tell I'm not a huge fan of trade secrecy. I like disclosure. This is a place where trade secrecy is supernatural. Those are two words, super space natural. And I would like there to be lots more transparency and disclosure. So there's a ton going on here. Actually, amusing thing that I will just tell you because, well, why not? It seems like the kind of show. I have a rule for myself that every time I get published, I buy a bottle of something delicious to drink and write on the back what it was for. And so actually this bottle was, you probably can't see that, but it's
kind of can see it. What does it say?
It says 4 roles for artificial intelligence, which was a piece that came out in the Yale Journal of Law and Technology last year, talking about what AI can do. And I think it's basically going to push frontiers, democratize expertise, automate drudgery, and allocate resources. And a lot of that's going to happen behind the scenes.
Awesome.
Jim McGuckin, the floor is yours.
Hey, screw my first question. I'm not a socialist. I want to ask a question about Trump's. He blows smoke. Okay. I love your pipe, by the way, Kate. Any rate, nonetheless, can he interfere with the Pfizer contract to sell overseas. In other words, I don't know all the details, but the bottom line is they apparently promised somebody else.
You know, I honestly don't know. I think the Defense Production Act could require the prioritization of government contracts. I don't know how exactly that would apply here. I mean, the other issue is stepping back, like, wow, what a monumental screw up, in as much as the government contracted with Pfizer for 100 million doses back in the summer and were offered a re-up to get a bunch more doses after we had interim results, like multiple times, including after we had interim results. Not even like, hey, maybe this works, but like, sure does look like this works. Like after we had interim results, that was like a month ago. And they said, we'll wait. Maybe we want some, maybe we won't. Let's try it now. And it turns out not everybody waited, because the interim results were pretty damn good. And then were followed up shortly afterwards because, hey, we're in the middle of a raging pandemic and it's easy to conduct trials quickly when tons of people are getting sick all the time because we can't mask or socially distance. Anyway, unclear to me what exactly the government can or can't do with respect to the DPA and Pfizer. Very clear to me what the government should have done, and pretty irksome that that didn't happen.
Yeah.
Mitchell, you get the last question, and then we have a bow tie challenge to discuss before we wrap.
Ooh.
Great. So I'm a biologist. I actually do a bit of CRISPR work in what I do. But I was curious if we could discuss Myriad a little bit. I mean, for me, it was a little bit shocking of a decision. And just sort of if the court is even philosophically the right place to make those decisions. Because I listened to that case, and I think it was Justice Sotomayor, though I could be mistaken, with, for example, referring to exons as extrons. And it really made me question, like, are the justices really the right people philosophically to be making this? And is there a better way to do this, or to even just better educate the justices? And I'm sure this actually applies to every type of case, not just these biology ones.
Yeah, so it's a fun question. Yeah, there's actually a concurrence in the Myriad decision, which is just a bizarre concurrence. It's Justice Scalia, the late Justice Scalia, wrote a one-paragraph concurrence that says, I agree with all the stuff in this opinion, except part 1A, which talks about the science, because I don't know the science, and I can't, like, sign on to it because I don't get the science. Frankly, this is weird to me, because, like, he's not an economist either. Well, he wasn't an economist. And he wasn't a political scientist.
But he does have money. He doesn't have biology.
So? I mean, granted, economists think they know all the things, and biologists don't think they know all the things. And yet, like, there are a bunch of things you can be expert in, and there are a bunch of things the Supreme Court writes about that they're not, in fact, experts in. Why say, like, ooh, science is scary and hard? Let's say that's something they can't understand. Like, whatever. They deal with a bunch of complicated stuff. We don't think they should handle complicated stuff. There's a lot of stuff they shouldn't talk about.
All right. So here is the bow tie challenge issue. While you were politely answering our questions and the questions of the audience, you were challenged to a bow tie tying race by, get this is the only time in your life this is ever going to happen to you, a former head of state. Thomas
Estonia.
Ilves, former president of Estonia, who is a fellow bow tie wearer, thinks he can tie his bow tie faster than you can.
Oh, man!
And so before we break, I'm going to bring Thomas in, and we are going to have the first ever bow tie tying race live. And whether ESPN picks this up and makes a formal sport out of it, I don't know.
Oh my gosh, I'm very excited.
So we are bringing Thomas in. He has accepted and is connecting.
I really thought that like, I know you said that bow tie was something else and was not related to the jacket, but they match so well.
But I have a question. You know, you're up on the... Oh, we have...
Oh, shit.
Now, I just... We can't hear...
I have this problem, Ben.
No, we can hear you.
I cannot hear you because
can't hear
it's
us.
breaking up. You have to do like 1, 2, 3, right?
Yeah,
So
okay.
wait.
So
You have to give
it
me-
will be 1, 2, 3, go. Okay? Ready?
No, wait.
All right.
Not now.
Wait,
no,
wait.
no. It hasn't started yet. No, stop. Okay.
All right, hands out.
Go. I have to take a screenshot of this. Oh my God.
Oh, we have a winner.
Smoked. Sorry, Thomas. Wow. It was because he was chewing gum, Nicholson.
I think Nicholson just won fair and square. So Thomas, you have challenged our guest, and now you can say, I have famously challenged Vladimir Putin to a fist fight. He has refused to. The Kremlin did formally respond, by the way, to my request. It's the only article in RT and Sputnik about me is the Kremlin's response to my challenge. But you have now been challenged to a bow tie tying competition by a much cooler head of state than Vladimir Putin, and you have prevailed. And so
if you didn't already have tenure, I'd tell you to put it in your tenure file.
And so I just want to say to everybody out there who ties a bow tie, Nicholson is the reigning in lieu of fun champion of bow tie tying. So if you, Thomas, if you want to challenge him to a rematch, we can bring him back sometime. But also, if there are others out there who think they can beat Nicholson at this, he's 1-0.
Amazing. Nicholson, thank you so much for hanging out with us. And I hope you come back again soon and enjoy your well-deserved drink. And until, how does this go, Ben? Do I say until
who's
then?
our guest for tomorrow?
Our guest for I've done this 256 times and I still can't remember.
I am told that our guest for tomorrow requires a moment of explanation. So let me say she is Alex Finley. She is a part of our effort to have the entire former CIA operative cadre on the show. She is also a satirist of the agency and has written, I think, 2 books of comic spoofing of her former employer.
What's funny about the CIA?
She is very funny, and she, as far as I know, does not wear a bow tie. But if she does, and if she thinks she can tie it faster than Nicholson, we may have to call you on short notice and have you back. Anyway, all that will get started 22 hours and 54 minutes from now. And until then, Kate?
We don't have fun anymore. We don't even have sports anymore. And so we make our own.
Live on the show.
Thank you so much. It was so much fun seeing your face. We'll do it again